I was abruptly awakened by sharp taps against my office door. Once again, I had dozed off for a while, leaving behind a few unsightly drops of drool where my head had rested. In a daze, I stumbled toward the door, and upon opening it, I found a herald standing before me. He drew a parchment from his satchel, saluted, and then moved on to the next recipient. I'd expected some form of greeting from him, however. He seemed just as exhausted as I was. These days have been especially demanding for those of us in the Westward Fleet. I enjoyed the first year since my promotion, with access to exclusive festivities, leniency for minor breaches of protocol, and all the other privileges the higher ranks revel in. Peaceful life, as the common folk will tell you, has far more benefits, especially when one climbs the social ladder. I would soon grow to think of such as more of a curse. As fate would have it, restlessness would soon afflict me. I'd become quite the combatant as a lieutenant and beheld my fair share of molten steel and bloody melee. I was no friend of the aforementioned common folk. The nefarious business that is military action is, for most men, ghastly and worth avoiding. For me, it is where I find myself most satisfied. Not for the killing, but because this indeed is the cruelty one must suffer before their name is etched into the pages of your. My dreams of martial magnificence were dashed as I opened the parchment. I called for the Sergeant Calcade to make way for my office. Once the old man had arrived, I had him read the contents of the letter as I drank a dratheberry tea. Order of summons from the office of Field Master Hilua Cassudra. I request the presence of Captain Yuda Alarith to discuss, at the soonest available hour, matters concerning the availability of personnel and equipment. My mood soured, for I scorned the company of that podgy patrician. While I would prefer to spend the day training for what this profession was born for, the field master remains to indulge in dancing and drinking at every possible opportunity. Signed and sealed by the heraldic pendant of his regency, Imperial Marshal of the Westward Fleet's Kuldrat Feldzarn. All fleet marshals and field masters shall restate these orders and assemble, at the soonest available hour, all officers belonging to their respective department. My eyes widened, and I nearly sent the contents of my beverage out and away from my snout. I had not expected this to be a continued message, let alone one sent from the highest-ranking man this side of the Imperial Citadel. Without a word, I dashed for my dress uniform. A great sensation of exhilaration and trepidation swirled in my mind without relent. The abrupt revelation of glorious conquest, and a chance to prove my worth as an officer beyond administrative duties, caused me to pant inelegantly. Excited to finally hear word of a martial assignment. Are we, Captain? I guess it beats that fat man's parties, or rather, puerility. Calcade said as I whirled about in blind enthusiasm. Excited? No, Sergeant. Excitement does no justice to surmise what rings out from my soul. This is as rare a day as any other. Where some think we would march away to conquer land, I may finally go now to conquer dignity for the names of my forebears. I never could understand the musings of you eccentric young types. I still harbor a wish of my own that we would go back to that peninsula, so I can take my eye back from those Hussanid jerk. Maybe, Sergeant. However, we have no time left for conjecture. Have the stable boy bring my mount. I must be off this instant. These are matters that, unlike pretty maidens and hearty melodies, cannot wait. Rhythmic jangling from the chain of my reins and stirrups, heavy grunts from my giant feline steed, and the heavy impacts of its 6 massive paws created a harmony of haste as we bolted for the field master's manor. It was within the hour that I approached the already opened gates. Several empty carriages were lined up neatly outside the stone wall of the nearly palace-sized habitation. I guided my tired mount towards what I presumed were stables, before a steadfast tenant requested I dismount and allow him to tend to his Felinian duties. The bit of rainfall that managed to coalesce on my shoulder mantle, while negligible for a fine rain, would be unbefitting of an officer yet to prove the totality of his potential. Just before I was to enter the manor, fate would have it that a housemaid opened the door. Without a word, she took all my dewy garments and went away at once to have them dried. For all the trouble I could cause the field master, disciplining those around him, even ordinary people, was not one of them. I continued towards what I'd assumed to be the manor's court. However, I heard the familiar voice of an old acquaintance. His thunderous voice, which could already be heard through the wooden door, threatened to force it open as his rumbustious laugh. Just when I thought the squat man was about to meet with a table, he instead fell flat. The couples had been dancing long enough to know what was and was not supposed to be in their way. Rather than gathering to help him up, or even kick him out, they'd step over him like he was a forest turd. The room was again filled with unrestrained roaring. Is this what happened at Adjutant Karki's wedding? Had I known he'd gotten that drunk, I'd not have complied with the cavalry exercise. I said with a feigned tone of regret. Captain Yuta, seems I left you as dry as a brown wine since last we met, said the brawny Tick-Hat, his 4 arms enveloping me in a constricting embrace. As strong as ever, Captain Hulitica. Now if it doesn't offend you, I would like tea to keep breathing come time for this meeting, I stammered, before he eventually let me go. Sorry, my friend. I'd continue our fellowship here, but it seems our guest of honor has arrived, he said, his gaze fixed on an entourage of hegemoths entering the manor's gate. We'd all gathered around a table cluttered with scrolls and parchments of every possible nature. There sat the rotund field master, who already reduced a glazed seed cake into a pitiful collection of crumbs. As he brushed off the scraps that had gathered atop his belly, he whispered something to a nearby house servant. The old man, dressed in fine black garments, scuttled away, returning with a few others in tow. Vanguards entered the room and stood at every window, clicking their scaled feet or hide boots against the stone floor with an assertive stomp. Immediately after, Lord Yudrika would enter. Everyone, spare for the field master, stood at immediate attention. I offered a stiff salute before returning my attention to the field master. This is a tremendous day. For the first time in almost 12 years, every officer of the Hecadian West War Department is gathered in one room. We even have the privilege of standing in the midst of not only an imperial noble, but the war hero, Yudrika Humdrade. I am very pleased also to announce we have gained 6 new captains. Somewhat lackluster, but that is all that can be afforded insofar as introductions are concerned, said the field master, satisfaction shone upon his face. The master of engines, Phados, a thin and hairy saber-toothed Cluthrade, saluted Cassandra and declared, "Indeed, these are matters that have made for feverish discussion even amongst those who populate the Imperial Senate. Archaeologists have discovered another corridor. Furthermore, I am speaking about those corridors, those strange and ancient monuments left by those who, if deemed ancient, would have the true scale of their age diminished. The passageways that made our exotic conquests possible?" Hulitica inquired. Precisely. An elite group of woodland rangers has already explored the other realm. They declared that what lush domain they found was most certainly uninhabited apart from new primitive species. It is now our task to fulfill the command of the Imperial Marshal of the Westward Fleets. Without dithering, all officers belonging to this department will execute protocol for mobilization. So then this concludes the meeting? Short, much to my disturbance. May I ask why this wasn't stated in the invitation? Lord Yudrika asked, his tone teeming with frustration. Secrecy. No matter how disruptive this gathering may have been to your schedules, it is no harm to be prudent in what will soon be war, said the field master. The distant lands we soon go to, even if at first seems to be the residence of none spare for simple animals, I protest to believe such a bountiful place could truly be uninhabited. I for one am delighted to hear that we would be afforded such an opportunity as this. I do not think our empire, in this decade of tranquility, has forgotten that we were baptized in fire. The first dynasty raised a sword, and so too shall the last be buried with one, I said illustriously. I cannot disagree, for I am no stranger to war, Captain Yuta. However, the use of my time and the scarcity of life in this new land is not what perturbs me. It is the fact that we had to do so in such a fashion. Who here should have ears for infiltration and eyes for selling our discoveries? Lord Yudrika asked, his tone interrogative. Phados replied, those who we have vanquished not long ago would be quick to side with whoever it is we are about to make our foe. The last Hussanid rebels know of the corridor's existence. It would be of no benefit to us should they learn also its location. We go with 15,000 infantry, 6,000 skirmishers, 4,000 artillerists, 2,000 lancers, 2,000 woodland rangers, and 700 vanguards. The master of engines will follow with his 200 field guns and 130 mortars. Not what I would call an army for conquest. However, it will suffice for the creation of a fortress network, said Field Master Kasudra. I would not call this a small force either, Field Master Kasudra, I said. Whatever it is we are to face upon arrival will surely not be prepared for the Empire. If it is the consensus of all officers present, I ask the more immediate question. In what order would you have us enter the corridor? For those of you that have not seen the monument, this is the largest of them to be uncovered yet. I had the fortune of discussing with the archaeologists the specifics of this site, and, from my estimates, 1,000 or more of our own may enter the new realm. So long, of course, as they are in a strict column formation, said the master of engines Phados. The 6 new captains would only have proven themselves in administration after the last exotic campaign. Even if they did find themselves in an engagement, I do not believe they would take command of a force larger than 50 men. I would make a request of you, Field Master, to allow me to take all of them, so I can see for myself if they have earned the title of captain and the 200 men that come with it, Lord Yadrika said. It seemed as though he was just as impatient as we were to see the exotic world. Very well. I would do no dishonor to rebuff a request from the likes of you, Lord Yadrika. After the Hornhead War, and especially the Chitaka campaign, I trust you'd make fine men of them. Leave the matter of creating supply lines and citadels to me, said the field master. We departed soon after, I and the 5 other captains just behind the scar-faced noble. We mounted our hegemoths, and as the massive cats thundered towards the camp, men from several regiments cheered as we passed. No doubt to celebrate the mere presence of the Lord. He had proven himself to belong to a new stock of the imperial aristocracy. Neither an imperial nor a confederalist, the unpolitical brawler had spent more of his life covering his blade in blood than even the vanguards. The men joked in saying he was born with a lance in one hand and a war flag in the other. I wanted to be like him, for I shared his passion for adventure, as well as his disdain for the affairs of state and lazy merrymaking. This is not to say we hate peace. Rather, we would despise to live a life without making an attempt to make it a glorious one. Every blister I earned on my talons after a long march, every thrashing I received for trespassing soldierly protocol is, as I see it, proof of our toil and the sugar that makes success so sweet. As our entourage began to return, piece by piece, to their respective pillars, my pillar, composed mostly of regulars and skirmishers, hosted many untried recruits. They were well trained when it came time to march or loose a wave of bolts at straw models. However, the number of them who had actually seen the carnage of war was far fewer than I'd hoped. I would ride to my tent and congregate with my lieutenants and Sergeant Calcade. Dandy you are today, my captain. The new coats do have a repressive crawl that stings the neck, the one-eyed soldier said as he tugged at his collar. You'll find that marching bends stiff fabrics into place. As for why we gather, it is time to see the odd monument created by the old ones. I request Lieutenants Sadakal and Thamura to gather their columns and march at double pace beside the skirmishers. Sergeant, you will be my herald. Any and all messages sent to me will be sent and delivered by you. I refused a herald because I don't trust those boys to ride a Panulican as hasty as you can. Captain, you think rightly to trust the quickest sky sailor in all the westward fleet, said Calcade, his fist raised in salute. Captain, before we depart, I'd like to deliver you a salmon from one of them woodland rangers. They'd taken a cartographer with him and drew you up a proper map. Lieutenant Sadakal said as he unlatched his satchel. Thank you, Lieutenant. Now let's be off to meet our destinies right beside that Lord Yadrika. Wood flutes rang out a steady fluttering tune. The war drums followed close behind, and to the beat the soldiers stomped along. The thunderous rhythm of thousands of feet, slamming against soft grass, soon became louder as we climbed the stone of ruins. An entire city, or at least what was left of one, surrounded us. At the center of the incredible network was a temple-like structure with a conical roof that seemed as if to pierce the blanket of clouds above. We would weave through ancient roadways before ascending the steps of the temple. We stopped just behind the rear of Captain Helitika's pillar. As I recalled earlier, 1,000 men was the maximum amount that could be let through to the other world. The Lord brought with him an impressive force of 2,000 men, and more if you consider the supply wagons. I was unaware as to how long the process of traveling was. I simply knew it must not be a short one. My suspicions would be proven false as the line would quickly ascend steps and make way for the incredible doorways of the palace-sized structure. Once inside, all 6 of the new captains and their pillars assembled into what looked like the floor of a Senate hall. The central room could have held half of the field master's manor within it. Against the walls surrounding the rear half of the room were rows of seats stacked high. Was this an auditorium? I continued to wonder where the elusive corridor might be when the air was suddenly enveloped in a dense mist. The white haze enveloped us like a cloud descending to cover us. I and the men began chattering as our confusion mounted. The wall of white fog soon became so dense that I was unable to see past the head of my steed. Almost as quickly as it appeared, it began to dissipate. The sensation in the air shifted from the dry and musty conditions of ancient stones to that of a crisp and warm summer evening. Light pierced through the thin layer of smoke still lingering, and we soon realized we were no longer inside that ancient stronghold. The men expressed their shock with a series of gasps and confused ramblings. As I looked around, I quickly recognized that we stood in the midst of a foreign world untouched by any Hecadian, or likely any other for that matter. We stood on a stone floor similar to the one within that incredible circular room. However, we were in what appeared to be a cave without a ceiling. The moistened black slate was suffocated by a plethora of vines and trees. The warm air, combined with a moist and sunny atmosphere, as I continued to breathe it in, made me feel almost powerful. I, of course, was a scaled individual, so I found it unsurprising that I was now in my element. There was a natural pathway that led out of the sunken cave. The musicians resumed their tune and, in rows of 4, began to ascend from the sunken area. As we began our march, I could see the woodland ranger's definition of lush did the total handsomeness of this land no honor. Vibrant flowering shrubs, tall spindly trees, and enough moss on the floor to make one think this wilderness was blanketed by an incredible green carpet. We continued marching before eventually reconvening with Lord Yadrika's force. I rode out to meet with him and, as all captains and lieutenants reconvened, the Lord began demonstrating his incomparable systemic efficiency. His servants began first by setting up a table and unfurled many maps detailing the foreign land. He had engineers begin immediately gathering their equipment, alongside sappers, to create a clearing. Woodland rangers would be ordered to search for a vantage point and search for natives. As we gathered to surround his table, he began detailing what he intended for each of us. I will divide you into groups of 3. 2 captains shall inhabit each group. You will take your pillars in a direction, so as to make a triangle of coverage. Each path originating from my central force will travel at half pace until the sun begins its descent. Once nightfall nears, you will establish a camp and await further orders. I and my units will occupy ourselves by creating a structure to establish an official headquarters. Without wanting to waste another moment, I met with the captain assigned to accompany our twofold expedition. I was glad to see Hulidica follow me as we headed for our respective hegemoths. Captain Yuta, if there's anyone I could have wished to make conquest with, it is you, the 4-armed behemoth said. Likewise to you, Captain Hulidica. Considering you're a betting man, would you like to make a wager? For 5 silver fangs, I would argue that the natives will be tiny primitives who eat the bark of these narrow trees. I will match your wager with 5 silver fangs and predict they will be hairy beasts the size of myself. No souls would see a land such as this and not go to war to keep it. I will add another 2 silver fangs to the man who finds them first. I will bargain that man is I, for my steed is faster. Mesma is larger and longer than Tugok. All right, let's see which of us is the master of the half-pace trot, I said, mimicking a rearward lean as if my steed was sprinting. The Tick-Hat let out a booming laugh, which I matched with a baritone warble of clicking. For a moment, I forgot that we were in an entirely different realm. It was not only odd in appearance, but it would no doubt become stranger as we uncovered its secrets. All my life, I dreamed of venturing far beyond the limits of the Empire, and after many stagnant years, that dream was realized. However, for some reason not yet known to me, a sense of uncertainty began to rise in my mind, as if someone was watching our advance with a cold and heavy gaze.